The silence stretched across the briefing room like a blade drawn against steel. 23 pilots sat in rigid attention, their flight suits bearing the insignia of the 14th Tactical Fighter Squadron, but their eyes held something darker doubt. On the projection screen, satellite imagery revealed a fortress carved into the mountainside, its concrete walls scarred by decades of warfare. The target designation read simply, Objective Blackbird. Colonel Marcus Thorne adjusted his glasses, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across his weathered face. "Gentlemen and lady," he said, his voice carrying the weight of 40 years in the cockpit, "this is not a drill. Intelligence suggests the facility houses advanced surface-to-air missile systems that could shift the balance of power in the entire region. One mistake, one miscalculation, and we're looking at a no-fly zone that extends 300 miles in every direction." Captain Lydia Phantom Kessler sat in the third row, her fingers tracing the edge of her tactical notebook. The call sign had followed her through 4 deployments, earned not from stealth or mystery, but from her uncanny ability to appear in the most dangerous airspace when least expected. Her F-16 had taken more hits than any other aircraft in the squadron, yet she'd never failed to bring her bird home. Still, the sideways glances from her fellow pilots suggested they saw something else, a liability wrapped in a flight suit. The briefing continued with technical specifications and weather reports, but Kessler's attention drifted to the scar running along her left temple, hidden beneath her regulation haircut. She'd earned that mark 3 years ago over the Kandahar Valley, when a surface-to-air missile had detonated close enough to shower her canopy with shrapnel. The medics had called it a miracle. The review board had called it poor judgment. The newspapers had called it proof that women didn't belong in fighter cockpits. "Phase 1 initiates at 400 hours, Thorne announced, his laser pointer circling the target area. "We go in fast, we go in clean, and we all come home. Questions?" Lieutenant Commander Jake Viper Morrison raised his hand. "Sir, what about electronic countermeasures? Intel suggests they have radar systems we've never encountered." "That's why we're bringing our best," Thorne replied, his gaze sweeping the room. "Each of you has been selected for this mission based on your unique capabilities. Trust your training, trust your aircraft, and trust each other." As the briefing concluded, Kessler noticed the way conversations died when she approached, the way her flight leader, Captain Torres, avoided eye contact, the way even the ground crew seemed to whisper when she passed. Tomorrow's mission would either vindicate her career or end it. In the military, perception was reality, and reality was unforgiving. The mountain fortress waited, its secrets buried beneath layers of concrete and steel. But Kessler had seen something in those satellite images that the others had missed, a detail that would change everything. The scar on her temple began to throb, as if responding to some distant memory she couldn't quite grasp. Dawn was 6 hours away, and with it, the most dangerous mission of her career. The sky above the desert base was clear, stars scattered like broken glass against the infinite darkness. Soon, that same sky would be filled with fire and thunder, and Captain Lydia Kessler would discover that some scars run deeper than flesh, reaching into the very soul of what it means to be a warrior. The pre-flight briefing had ended, but the real battle was just beginning. Captain Lydia Kessler stood alone in the hangar bay, her hand resting on the nose of her F-16 Fighting Falcon. The aircraft's designation, 860291, was painted in stark white numerals against the gray fuselage, but she knew every rivet, every panel, every subtle vibration that distinguished her bird from the 19 others lined up in perfect formation. The ground crew called her Phantom, because she seemed to vanish into thin air during combat, reappearing where enemy pilots least expected. But the truth was simpler and more painful. She'd earned the call sign because she felt invisible, forgotten, a ghost haunting the edges of military respectability. The hangar smelled of jet fuel and hydraulic fluid, familiar scents that had become as comforting as home. Her crew chief, Master Sergeant Elena Vasquez, emerged from beneath the wing with a tablet in her hands. All systems green, Captain. She's ready to dance. Kessler nodded, her eyes fixed on the aircraft's armament. 4 AIM-120 AMRAAM missiles hung from the wing pylons, their sleek profiles designed for beyond visual range engagement. A single 20 mm 61 Vulcan cannon was mounted in the port wing root, loaded with 511 rounds of armor-piercing ammunition. The configuration was standard for air-to-air combat, but intelligence suggested tomorrow's mission would require something more versatile. "Sergeant, what's the latest on the target area's air defenses?" Kessler asked, her voice betraying none of the anxiety that gnawed at her stomach. Vasquez consulted her tablet. Updated intel came in an hour ago. They've got SA-15 Gauntlet systems, possibly SA-20 Gargoyle long-range missiles. The electronic warfare package suggests radar systems we haven't seen before. She paused, studying Kessler's face. "Captain, you sure you're ready for this? The squadron's been talking." "Let them talk," Kessler interrupted, her tone sharper than intended. "I've been flying combat missions while half of them were still in flight school." The truth was more complicated. Kessler had graduated third in her class from the Air Force Academy, completed advanced fighter training with distinction, and accumulated over 2,000 flight hours in combat zones. But military culture was unforgiving, and one incident could overshadow a decade of exemplary service. The Kandahar Valley engagement had been unavoidable. Her wingman's aircraft had suffered hydraulic failure, leaving him defenseless against enemy fighters. She'd broken formation to provide cover, engaging 3 enemy aircraft simultaneously while guiding her disabled wingman to safety. Both pilots had survived, but the mission commander had filed a report questioning her judgment. The review board had recommended additional training. The media had seized on the story as evidence that women couldn't handle the pressure of aerial combat. 3 years later, she was still fighting to prove them wrong. "I've got your back, Captain," Vasquez said quietly. "Always have." The hangar lights dimmed to their night configuration, casting long shadows across the polished concrete floor. In a few hours, the base would come alive with the controlled chaos of a combat launch. Pilots would conduct final briefings, ground crews would perform last-minute inspections, and the tower would coordinate the most complex air operation in the squadron's history. Kessler walked slowly around her aircraft, performing the ritual inspection that had become second nature. The F-16 was a masterpiece of engineering, 49 feet of aluminum and titanium designed for one purpose: aerial supremacy. Its single Pratt & Whitney F-100 turbofan engine could produce 29,000 pounds of thrust, pushing the aircraft to speeds exceeding Mach 2. The fly-by-wire flight control system could execute maneuvers that would tear apart older aircraft, while the AN/APG-68 radar could track multiple targets simultaneously at ranges exceeding 100 miles. But technology was only as good as the pilot who wielded it. Tomorrow, Kessler would face not just enemy aircraft and surface-to-air missiles, but the weight of expectation and the burden of proof. She touched the scar on her temple, feeling the raised tissue that served as a permanent reminder of her mortality. The sky was vast and unforgiving, but it was also the only place where she felt truly alive. The mission briefing had revealed the target's location and defensive capabilities, but Kessler suspected there was more to the story. Something about the satellite imagery bothered her, a detail that tugged at the edges of her memory like a half-remembered dream. The fortress built into the mountainside wasn't just a military installation, it was a symbol, a statement carved in stone and steel. As she completed her inspection, Kessler noticed a figure approaching from the far end of the hangar. Colonel Thorne walked with the measured pace of a man who had seen too much war, his flight suit bearing the ribbons of campaigns spanning 3 decades. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held a gravity that made her stomach tighten. "Captain," he said, stopping beside her aircraft, "we need to talk." The massive hangar doors stood open to the desert night, revealing a sky so clear that individual stars seemed close enough to touch. Colonel Thorne gestured toward the aircraft, his expression thoughtful. "Beautiful machine, isn't she? I flew her predecessor in Desert Storm. The F-16A, different avionics, different weapon systems, but the same heart, the same hunger for the sky." Captain Kessler remained at attention, waiting for whatever bomb the colonel was about to drop. In her experience, late-night conversations with senior officers rarely ended well. "Sir, if this is about the mission parameters—" "It's not about the mission," Thorne interrupted. "It's about you." He moved to the aircraft's nose, running his hand along the gray paint. "38 years I've been in this business, Kessler. I've seen pilots who could execute textbook maneuvers but couldn't think under pressure. I've seen others who flew by instinct but couldn't follow orders. You're different." The compliment felt like a trap. Kessler had learned to distrust praise, especially from commanders who held her career in their hands. "Sir, I appreciate the confidence, but—" "The Kandahar Valley incident," Thorne continued. "I've read the reports, all of them. The official version, the classified addendum, even the testimony your wingman gave to the review board." He turned to face her, his weathered features softened by something approaching respect. "You saved that pilot's life. In the process, you engaged 3 enemy aircraft simultaneously and achieved 2 confirmed kills. The third fighter broke off and retreated." Kessler's jaw tightened. "The review board concluded that I acted outside mission parameters." "The review board concluded that you prioritized human life over tactical objectives," Thorne corrected. "In their world, that's a flaw. In mine, it's leadership." He paused, studying her face. "Tomorrow's mission isn't just about destroying a target, Captain. It's about proving that courage comes in many forms, and that sometimes the most important decisions are made in the space between heartbeats." The colonel's words hung in the air like smoke, dissipating slowly into the vast emptiness of the hangar. Kessler felt something shift inside her chest, a tension she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. "Sir, what aren't you telling me about this mission?" Thorne smiled, the expression transforming his face. "That's the right question, Captain. Intelligence suggests the target facility is more than just a missile installation. We have reason to believe it houses advanced research equipment, possibly related to electronic warfare systems we've never encountered. If I'm right, tomorrow's mission will be the first salvo in a new kind of war." The implications were staggering. Electronic warfare capabilities could neutralize entire air forces, turning sophisticated aircraft into expensive targets. The balance of power in the region, possibly the world, could shift overnight. "And you're trusting me with this information because—" "Because you're the only pilot in this squadron who's proven they can think independently under pressure," Thorne replied. "The others are excellent aviators, but they follow orders. You follow your conscience, even when it costs you." He gestured toward the scar on her temple. "That mark isn't a symbol of failure, Captain. It's a badge of honor earned in defense of a fellow warrior." The night air was cool against her skin, carrying the scent of desert sage and aviation fuel. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the low rumble of transport aircraft arriving from other bases, bringing personnel and equipment for the morning's operation. The mission was growing in scope and complexity, but its ultimate purpose remained unclear. "Sir, what do you need from me?" she asked. Thorne's expression grew serious. "I need you to be exactly what you've always been, a pilot who sees what others miss, who acts when others hesitate, who brings everyone home." He paused, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "And I need you to know that whatever happens tomorrow, you have my complete confidence." The colonel turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. Kessler remained beside her aircraft, processing the conversation. For 3 years she'd carried the weight of official disapproval, the burden of proving herself worthy of trust. Now, with the most dangerous mission of her career hours away, she finally understood that respect wasn't something to be earned. It was something to be claimed. The F-16 stood silent beside her, its weapons systems ready for battle. Tomorrow, she would climb into that cockpit and face whatever waited in the mountain fortress. But tonight, for the first time in years, she felt like she belonged. The pre-dawn briefing room buzzed with nervous energy as 23 pilots took their seats. The walls were covered with tactical maps, weather reports, and targeting data, but the atmosphere was different from the previous night's session. Word had spread that the mission profile had changed, that intelligence had identified additional threats requiring modified tactics. Captain Kessler entered the room to find the conversations dying as she passed, but the silence felt different now, respectful rather than dismissive. Lieutenant Commander Morrison approached as she settled into her chair. "Phantom, heard you got a private briefing from the old man last night. Anything we should know?" Kessler shook her head. "Just standard pre-mission review." The lie came easily, but she could see the doubt in Morrison's eyes. The military ran on information, and pilots were particularly sensitive to anything that might affect their chances of survival. Colonel Thorne entered the room carrying a manila folder marked with classification stamps. His expression was grim as he moved to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have updated intelligence on the target. The facility is larger than initially believed, with defensive systems that may include advanced electronic warfare capabilities." A murmur ran through the room. Electronic warfare was the nightmare scenario for modern pilots. Sophisticated jamming systems could disable aircraft electronics, turning fighter jets into expensive gliders. The F-16's fly-by-wire system was particularly vulnerable, relying on computer processors to maintain stable flight. "The mission profile remains unchanged," Thorne continued. "Phase 1 involves establishing air superiority over the target area. Phase 2 requires precision strikes against specific hardened targets. Phase 3 is extraction and return to base." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "However, we now have reason to believe the facility may house personnel with specialized knowledge of our aircraft systems." The implications were chilling. If enemy forces had access to detailed technical specifications, they could potentially exploit vulnerabilities in the F-16's design. Kessler felt her pulse quicken as she realized the true scope of the mission. This wasn't just about destroying a target, it was about preventing a technological catastrophe. "Sir," Captain Torres raised his hand, "what about electronic countermeasures, if they can jam our systems?" "Each aircraft has been fitted with enhanced ECM pods," Thorne replied. "Additionally, we'll be operating under strict emissions control procedures. No active radar beyond absolutely necessary, no unnecessary radio transmissions." He looked directly at Kessler. "We'll be relying on visual identification and passive sensors for the majority of the mission." Visual identification. The phrase sent a chill down Kessler's spine. Modern air combat was fought at ranges where enemy aircraft appeared as blips on radar screens, not as physical objects in the sky. Flying without active radar was like fighting blind, relying on instinct and experience rather than technology. "Weather over the target area is clear with light winds," the meteorologist reported. "Visibility unlimited, ceiling and visibility okay. However, we're tracking a low-pressure system moving in from the west. If the mission extends beyond the planned duration, we may encounter deteriorating conditions on the return flight." The tactical officer took over, outlining ingress and egress routes, emergency procedures, and communication protocols. Each pilot received a mission packet containing maps, frequencies, and recognition codes. The level of detail was impressive, but Kessler noticed gaps in the intelligence picture. The enemy's electronic warfare capabilities were described in vague terms, and the facility's internal layout remained largely unknown. "Time hack in 5 minutes," Thorne announced. "Final equipment check, then we proceed to aircraft. Remember, we go in as a team, we fight as a team, and we come home as a team." As the pilots synchronized their watches, Kessler noticed Torres studying her with an expression she couldn't quite read. The flight leader had been distant since the Kandahar Valley incident, maintaining professional courtesy while clearly doubting her judgment. But something in his eyes suggested a shift in perspective. "Phantom," he said quietly, "I want you on my wing for the initial penetration. Your experience with electronic warfare environments could be crucial." The assignment was both an honor and a burden. Flying wing position required absolute precision and unwavering trust between pilots. Any mistake could be fatal for both aircraft, but it also represented a vote of confidence from her immediate superior, an acknowledgement that her skills were valued despite past controversies. "Copy that lead," she replied, using the standard radio protocol. "I'll be on your 6." The briefing concluded with a moment of silence for pilots who wouldn't be returning home. It was a ritual as old as military aviation, an acknowledgement of mortality that transformed nervous energy into focused determination. As the room emptied, Kessler remained behind, studying the target photographs one more time. Something about the fortress bothered her, a detail that seemed familiar yet elusive. The scar on her temple began to throb again, as if responding to some subconscious recognition. She'd seen this place before, or something like it. The realization struck her like a physical blow. This wasn't just another mission. It was personal. The flight line was a symphony of controlled chaos as ground crews performed final inspections and loaded weapons systems. 23 F-16 Fighting Falcons sat in perfect formation, their gray paint schemes designed to blend with the sky. Each aircraft represented millions of dollars of taxpayer investment and decades of engineering refinement, but their true value lay in the pilots who would soon climb into their cockpits. Captain Kessler walked the line, observing the ritual preparations that preceded every combat mission. Armament specialists checked missile seeker heads and cannon ammunition feeds. Avionics technicians verified radar and communication systems. Fuel trucks topped off internal tanks and external drop tanks, ensuring maximum range for the deep penetration mission. Her own aircraft, tail number 860291, received special attention from Master Sergeant Vasquez. The crew chief was a perfectionist who treated each F-16 as if it were her own child. Every panel was secured, every connection verified, every system tested multiple times. The aircraft's nose art featured a small phantom figure, barely visible against the gray paint, a personal touch that had survived multiple regulations reviews. "She's ready, Captain," Vasquez reported, handing over the aircraft's logbook. "All systems nominal, weapons hot, fuel at maximum capacity. The new ECM pod is integrated and tested." She paused, her expression serious. "Bring her home, ma'am, both of you." The emotional weight of the comment wasn't lost on Kessler. Ground crews formed bonds with their aircraft that transcended mere mechanical relationships. They knew every quirk, every limitation, every capability of the machines they maintained. When pilots failed to return, crew chiefs mourned not just the loss of life, but the destruction of something they'd helped create. "I'll take good care of her," Kessler promised, accepting the logbook, "and she'll take good care of me." The sunrise was still 30 minutes away, but the eastern horizon showed the first hints of dawn. The desert sky was clear, offering perfect visibility for the mission ahead. Weather conditions were ideal for precision flying, but they would also make the formation visible to enemy observers at maximum range. Colonel Thorne appeared at her shoulder, his flight suit bearing the same patches and insignia as his pilot's. At 58, he was technically too old for combat missions, but his experience and leadership were considered essential for the operation's success. "Beautiful morning for flying," he observed. "Yes, sir," Kessler replied. "Perfect conditions for the mission." "And for getting shot at," Thorne added with dark humor. "Clear skies mean no place to hide." He studied her face, looking for signs of nervousness or doubt. "How are you feeling, Captain?" The question was more than casual concern. Pilot psychology was a crucial factor in mission success, and commanders were trained to identify stress indicators that might compromise performance. Kessler had learned to project confidence even when her stomach was churning with anxiety. "Ready to execute, sir," she said, using the standard response. "All systems go." Thorne nodded, but his expression remained thoughtful. "I've been thinking about our conversation last night, about the nature of courage and the importance of independent thinking." He paused, watching ground crews make final preparations. "There's something else you should know about this mission." The colonel's tone suggested classified information, details that hadn't been shared in the general briefing. Kessler waited, knowing that curiosity was often a pilot's worst enemy. Too much information could lead to overthinking, while too little could result in fatal surprises. "The target facility isn't just a missile installation," Thorne continued. "Intelligence suggests it houses a prototype electronic warfare system capable of disrupting our aircraft's fly-by-wire controls. If deployed successfully, it could neutralize our entire air force." The revelation hit Kessler like a physical blow. Fly-by-wire systems were the heart of modern fighter aircraft, constantly adjusting control surfaces to maintain stable flight. Without computer assistance, the F-16 was inherently unstable, requiring constant pilot input to prevent catastrophic loss of control. An electronic warfare system capable of disrupting those computers would be like removing the wings from their aircraft. "Sir, how reliable is this intelligence?" she asked. "Reliable enough that we're risking 23 pilots and aircraft to prevent it," Thorne replied. "The prototype system is believed to be in final testing phases. If we don't act now, we may never have another opportunity." The weight of responsibility settled on Kessler's shoulders like a lead blanket. This wasn't just another tactical mission. It was a strategic operation that could determine the outcome of future conflicts. The pressure was immense, but it was also liberating. For the first time in years, she felt like she was part of something truly important. "I won't let you down, sir," she said. Thorne smiled, the expression transforming his weathered features. "Captain, I've never doubted that for a moment." The eastern sky was beginning to show color as the first rays of sunlight painted the horizon in shades of gold and crimson. Soon, the desert would be fully illuminated, and 23 fighter aircraft would launch into the morning sky. The mission ahead was dangerous, but it was also an opportunity for redemption, a chance to prove that courage came in many forms. Captain Kessler walked toward her aircraft, her flight suit heavy with survival gear and emergency equipment. The weight was familiar, comforting in its practicality. Every item had a purpose, every system a backup. The military left nothing to chance, but ultimately, success depended on the skill and determination of individual warriors. Her F-16 waited in the growing light, its sleek profile promising speed and agility. Within minutes, she would be strapped into the cockpit, breathing oxygen through a mask, communicating through radio frequencies, and trusting her life to a machine that represented the pinnacle of human engineering. The partnership between pilot and aircraft was sacred, a bond forged in training and tempered in combat. The mission was about to begin, and with it, the most important flight of her career. The cockpit of an F-16 Fighting Falcon was a marvel of ergonomic design. Every switch, display, and control positioned for maximum efficiency during high-stress combat maneuvers. Captain Kessler settled into the Martin Baker ejection seat, her hands automatically beginning the startup sequence that had become second nature through thousands of hours of training and combat experience. The head-up display glowed to life, projecting critical flight information directly onto the bulletproof glass canopy. "Phantom 2-1, radio check," crackled through her headset. Captain Tor's voice was calm and professional, but she could hear the underlying tension that preceded every combat mission. "Phantom 2-1, loud and clear," Kessler replied, her fingers dancing across the control panel. The aircraft systems came online in sequence: inertial navigation, radar, weapons, electronic countermeasures. Each green light represented millions of dollars of technology designed to keep her alive and mission effective. The Pratt& Whitney F100 turbofan engine spooled up with a characteristic whine, its 29,000 pounds of thrust barely restrained by the aircraft's brakes. The sound was music to any fighter pilot's ears, a promise of power and freedom that transcended earthly limitations. Through the canopy, she could see the other 22 aircraft in various stages of preparation, their pilots conducting identical pre-flight rituals. "Phantom Flight, this is Tower," the air traffic controller's voice cut through the engine noise. "Weather is clear, winds light and variable. You are cleared to taxi when ready." TOR's F-16 began moving first, its nose-wheel steering system guiding the aircraft onto the taxiway. The formation followed in precise sequence, each pilot maintaining regulation spacing while navigating toward the active runway. The ballet of military aviation was beautiful in its efficiency, every movement choreographed to maximize safety and effectiveness. As they taxied past the base operations center, Kessler noticed ground personnel stopping their work to watch the formation pass. Some saluted, others simply stood at attention, recognizing the gravity of the moment. Combat launches were relatively rare in peacetime, and everyone understood that not all the aircraft might return. The control tower loomed ahead, its windows reflecting the morning sun. Inside, controllers monitored multiple radar screens, tracking aircraft movements across thousands of square miles of airspace. Today's mission would take the formation beyond the range of ground-based radar, into regions where pilots would depend entirely on their own sensors and judgment. "Phantom Flight, hold short of runway 27, Tower instructed. "Traffic is a C-130 on final approach, 3 miles out." The formation stopped behind the white line marking the runway threshold. Kessler used the delay to conduct a final systems check, verifying that all aircraft systems were functioning within normal parameters. The multifunction displays showed green across the board, but she knew that electronics could fail without warning, especially in the electromagnetic environment of modern warfare. The C-130 Hercules transport aircraft roared overhead, its 4 turboprop engines creating a distinctive sound that contrasted sharply with the high-pitched whine of jet engines. The cargo plane was probably carrying supplies or personnel to another base, conducting the routine missions that kept military operations functioning. But today, the fighter pilots held center stage. "Phantom Flight, you are cleared for takeoff," Tower announced. "Winds are calm, visibility unlimited. Have a safe mission." TOR's aircraft moved onto the runway, its nose pointing toward the horizon. The F-16's profile was unmistakable, a sleek fuselage topped by a bubble canopy, with a single vertical stabilizer and variable geometry air intake. The aircraft represented 40 years of aeronautical evolution, from the early jets of the Korean War to the sophisticated multi-role fighters of the modern era. "Phantom 2-1 is rolling," Torres transmitted, his voice tight with concentration. The F-16 accelerated down the runway, its engine producing a thunderous roar that echoed across the desert. At 150 knots, Torres pulled back on the stick, and the aircraft lifted gracefully into the morning sky. The sight never failed to inspire awe, 30,000 pounds of metal and fuel defying gravity through the application of physics and engineering. Kessler's turn came 30 seconds later. She aligned her aircraft with the runway centerline, her left hand on the throttle, her right hand on the stick. The tower cleared her for takeoff, and she pushed the throttle forward to full military power. The F-16 surged forward, pressing her back into the ejection seat as acceleration forces built toward 3 times the weight of gravity. At rotation speed, she pulled back gently on the stick, feeling the aircraft's nose rise toward the sky. The moment of liftoff was always magical, the instant when earthbound machinery became airborne, when the pilot's domain shifted from 2 dimensions to 3. The desert floor fell away beneath her, replaced by the infinite blue of the morning sky. Phantom 2-2 is airborne, she reported, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The formation joined up over the desert, 23 aircraft flying in perfect formation. From a distance, they would appear as a single entity, a steel-gray constellation moving across the sky at 500 miles per hour. But each aircraft carried a unique pilot with individual skills, fears, and motivations. Colonel Thorne's voice crackled over the radio. "Phantom Flight, this is Lead. We are proceeding to the target area. Maintain formation and monitor for threats. Electronic warfare environment is expected to be hostile." The mission was officially underway. Ahead lay 400 miles of desert, mountains, and eventually, the fortress that had been carved into solid rock. The target represented more than just a military objective. It was a symbol of the technological arms race that defined modern warfare. Kessler checked her navigation display, confirming their course and estimated time to target. The numbers were precise, calculated to the second, but she knew that combat had a way of making even the best plans obsolete. Flexibility and adaptation were as important as weapons and fuel. The sky stretched endlessly ahead, beautiful and treacherous in equal measure. Flying in formation required absolute concentration and trust. Each pilot had to maintain precise spacing while monitoring their aircraft systems, watching for threats, and preparing for the mission ahead. Captain Kessler held her position on Tor's right wing, her F-16 exactly 200 feet away and slightly behind the flight leader's aircraft. The gap between them represented the margin between life and death, close enough for mutual support, far enough to avoid collision if sudden maneuvers became necessary. The landscape below was a tapestry of desert colors, from the pale sand of ancient lake beds to the deep brown of volcanic rock formations. Occasional roads cut straight lines across the terrain, connecting isolated settlements and military installations. But for the most part, the region was uninhabited, a vast wilderness where the only sounds were the wind and the distant thunder of jet engines. "Phantom Flight, this is Overlord," a new voice crackled through the radio. The call sign belonged to an E-3 Sentry AWACS aircraft, an airborne command and control platform that could track hundreds of aircraft simultaneously. "We show you on course and on time. Be advised, we have multiple radar contacts bearing 090 from your position, range unknown." The news sent a chill through the formation. Enemy aircraft were already airborne, potentially positioned to intercept the strike package before it reached the target. The mission planners had anticipated this possibility, but the reality was always more sobering than theoretical discussions in briefing rooms. "Overlord Phantom Lead," Tors replied. "Can you identify the contacts?" "Negative, Phantom Lead. Electronic interference is limiting our radar resolution. Recommend you proceed with caution and maintain defensive posture." Electronic interference. The enemy's electronic warfare capabilities were already affecting the mission, degrading the AWACS aircraft sensors and reducing the information available to the strike formation. If the interference intensified, the fighters would be operating blind, relying on their own short-range radars and visual contact for threat detection. Kessler checked her own radar display, noting the static and false returns that indicated active jamming. The AN/APG-68 radar was among the most sophisticated airborne sensors ever developed, capable of tracking multiple targets while simultaneously guiding weapons to their destinations. But even the most advanced technology had limitations, and electronic warfare was specifically designed to exploit those weaknesses. "Phantom Flight, this is Lead," Tors transmitted. "We are entering the threat envelope. Maintain formation and prepare for defensive maneuvers. Weapons tight until further notice." The formation continued southeast, following a course that would take them around known surface-to-air missile sites while providing the most direct route to the target. The flight plan was a masterpiece of tactical planning, balancing speed, stealth, and surprise to maximize the probability of mission success. But plans were only as good as their execution, and execution depended on the skill and courage of individual pilots. The mountains were visible now, a jagged line of peaks rising from the desert floor. The target facility was hidden somewhere in those mountains, protected by natural barriers and artificial defenses. Intelligence suggested that the installation had been under construction for over a decade, with tunnels and bunkers carved deep into solid rock. Conventional bombs might not be sufficient to penetrate the facility's outer defenses. Phantom 2-2, this is lead. Tor's voice was tense. I'm picking up multiple radar contacts bearing 085, range 40 miles. They appear to be fighters, possibly MiG-29s or similar. Kessler's pulse quickened. The MiG-29 Fulcrum was a formidable adversary, designed specifically to counter American fighter aircraft. With its twin engines and advanced avionics, the Soviet-designed fighter could match the F-16's performance in most flight regimes. More importantly, the pilots flying those aircraft were likely experienced professionals who understood the capabilities and limitations of Western technology. Copy lead, she replied. I'm showing the same contacts on my scope. Recommend we maintain current heading and altitude. The decision to continue toward the target despite the presence of enemy fighters was tactically sound, but emotionally challenging. Every pilot's instinct was to engage threats as soon as possible, to achieve air superiority before proceeding with the ground attack mission. But the strategic objective was more important than tactical considerations, and the formation had to reach the target facility before enemy defenses could be fully activated. Phantom Flight, this is Overlord. The AWACS controller's voice was urgent. We have additional contacts bearing 090, range 60 miles. Total count is now 12 aircraft, possibly more. They appear to be converging on your position. 12 enemy fighters. The odds were sobering but not impossible. The F-16's advanced avionics and superior training of American pilots provided significant advantages, but numbers mattered in aerial combat. The mission was rapidly becoming a test of skill, courage, and tactical innovation. Colonel Thorne's voice cut through the radio chatter. Phantom Flight, we are approaching the point of no return. Enemy forces are mobilizing, but the mission remains unchanged. We press on to the target.